Hello and welcome to Perspectives on Equity, hosted by Capital One. I'm Black Enterprise reporter Ashante Hathaway. Each episode of Perspectives on Equity, our joint video series, features the personal and professional experiences of Black executives sharing stories of how they're advancing their careers. Joining us for today's episode is Stef Maynard-Collier, a vice president and the head of diversity, inclusion, and belonging consulting at Capital One. She'll be sharing her personal experience with Black influence in the workplace and how it has shaped her career. Well, Steph, thank you so much for joining us here at Black Enterprise today. We're so happy to have you. I wanted to start off with you just telling us about yourself and what is your role with Capital One.
Absolutely. Well, first, also, thank you, Ashante, for the chance to be here with you and Black Enterprise for partnering with us at Capital One for this really powerful series that we're doing together. I lead diversity, inclusion, and belonging consulting for Capital One, and the team I have the privilege of leading as part of the amazing set of humans that makes up the enterprise DIB, diversity, inclusion, and belonging function at Capital One. You might be wondering what DIB consulting actually looks like. Essentially, you can think about my team as the intersection of HR, strategy, and management consulting, really focused on delivering scalable solutions through the lens of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. In our day-to-day, we're connecting the enterprise DIB vision to the business and the talent strategy, where really the change happens. So a little bit of where the rubber meets the road.
Okay, well, knowing today's conversation is focused on Black influence in the workplace, why do you think this topic is worth talking about?
Well, since it's just you and I talking, I'll let you in on a secret. We are here. And I think your use of the word worth is spot on. There's real value in our voice and in the need and ability to use our voice and our influence in the workplace, in our communities, in government. Earlier this year, McKinsey and Company released a report, and the findings are really significant. In the US, 12% of private sector workers are Black. That's about 15 million Black workers. And the overall Black labor workforce is just over 20 million. That's public, private, and unemployed looking for work. And this is the key point. Their analysis showed that Black workers in the private sector are underrepresented in the highest growth geographies and the highest paying industries, and we're overrepresented in low growth geographies and in frontline jobs that generally pay less. When you look at the impact of the pandemic on Black workers, especially in the private sector, you really come to understand the disparities and the compounding negative effects highlighted in that report. And so when you consider the worth and the necessity of Black influence in the workplace, it's clear our voices must be here to start to begin to correct and have transformational change in these important areas.
Well, what do you think happens when we don't build Black influence in the workplace?
I know you said build, but I'm going to shift that a bit to tap into what happens when we don't tap into Black influence. We won't see the change that we want and that organizations are striving for. And as you know, organizations really of late are striving for that more and more. And that means we must be present in those conversations, or we won't achieve the equity in our systems and our processes that are necessary. Some time ago, I did some pro bono consulting with a nonprofit that was looking at flexible work options for working mothers. And this was for when they were returning from leave. What could they do to make sure that their experience, now that they were back to work, provided flexibility? And it was interesting that the conversations was largely around logistics and the timing of that policy solution. And those discussions were generally having most of the group in agreement. But there was one woman, a Black woman, who began to talk about when this type of policy really would have benefited her in her career. And it was not in the very early infancy stages of her children. It was when her son was becoming an adolescent. And she talked about to the group her experience and her perspective of how that flexibility to be at home when he got home from school would have been so important, to meet his friends, to be able to spend the time with him, to go to his activities, ensure that he was applying all the driving lessons that she and her husband were teaching him, where to go, where not to go. If those options had been available to her, those would have been things that would have been more powerful at that point. She had had family members at the early stages of her child's life to lean on. It was really this point in her career when he was older that she needed that time. And the interesting thing occurred as we started to have this dialogue, and that was that a single dad in the room started to talk about his perspective. So first, her very influence in this discussion brought another perspective of this single father who basically we created an opportunity for that policy to affect parents versus just working mothers.
Okay, right.
And then we really started to have a conversation about, could we allow this policy to be taken advantage of at any point in a parent's need? And what would that look like? And that was really very transformational. And without her perspective to influence that discussion, the policy would not have evolved and been as robust as it came to be.
Well, so many people, they draw from experiences of others and other stories and Black leaders. Can you tell us about a Black leader who has inspired your career journey?
Well, I'm thinking more recently because I'm at Capital One. I've been here now and had the chance to really be influenced and grow around a number of amazing leaders. And I'm thinking about Trenda Hall, actually a leader inside of our retail bank who likes to talk about leading from every seat. I think this is something that I've tried to uphold. It's something that I tried to coach leaders and my team around doing. It's an important aspect of influence. And it's something that I think I hadn't intentionally thought about over the course of my career, but have really tried to find ways to be thoughtful about, no matter what room you're in, no matter who you're engaged with at that point in time, is there an opportunity for you to lead the conversation, for you to have some influence on how we move forward? And that's something that Trenda's just articulated, and I've really been more mindful about talking about of late.
And just adding on to that, would you say she inspired your leadership style and the way you influence others within the workplace?
Well, I think in particular, focusing on more junior associates and really trying to remind those individuals that we aren't always trying to influence upward. You need to focus on who's in your lane today. It could be any person having an opportunity for you to mentor them or to coach them. It may not be a leadership interaction. And so just being mindful that I think our junior voices sometimes feel like there's a place and a time for them to bring that in, and they should certainly look for important intersections, but it doesn't matter what level you're at. You need to go out and seek those opportunities to find ways to influence discussions, ideas, conversations that will lead to the change that you're looking for, that may or may not be in and around the space of diversity and inclusion. It may simply be around the role that you want to have or roles that you'd like to see other people playing inside of your team. There's an opportunity to instill some of that influence no matter where you are.
And you talked about junior associates. When developing your associates and future leaders at Capital One, how do you sort of pass the baton, instilling influence and leadership to others?
Well, I do really try to focus on mentoring, but I do that pretty informally. I feel like I've had a really great opportunity to have lots of individuals invest in me over my career. And so I'm looking forward to making sure that I can help others understand again that it doesn't really matter what level you are, you have a perspective and an experience that is valuable. Your opportunity is bringing that into the room, into the conversation. I also think it's incredibly important to encourage my team to grow in vulnerability. It's how we find common ground with one another, and that really leads to powerful conversations. And especially in the work that we're doing, the ability to connect on a human level is how we actually really gain trust. And that trust is necessary when we think about some of these really difficult business solutions that we're solving for, that the team is working through.
And then there's this idea that peers have such an influence and effect on you on a day-to-day basis. So how do your peers help to ensure Capital One is moving the needle overall for racial equality, though, in the workplace?
Well, I think folks may be familiar, but it's certainly worth repeating that last year we launched CORE, which is our Capital One Racial Equity Initiative. And that's been really focused on increased diversity and representation of Black and Latinx associates, especially executives and people managers. We're working to strengthen our culture of inclusion and belonging. And we're really leveraging the size and scope of our organization to invest in communities of color and expand economic opportunities for Black and Latinx low and moderate income communities. That's obviously at an enterprise level and having a tremendous impact on people, culture, and communities. But in the day-to-day, being that we're true consulting partners to the business, the way we do that is really ensuring that we are integrating the solutions because that's what's needed for lasting change.
So what kind of advice would you give to our audience, you would say today, that they could take back into their roles to influence change in their workplace?
Absolutely. I think my team would know this one right off. I always tell folks to focus on transformation, not perfection. Folks are so worried about, are you going to have the perfect conversation? Will you say the right thing? Will you say the wrong thing? Will you have the perfect solution to really solve for the talent that you need? And perfection truly can be the enemy of the good. There's always going to be change in our environment. There's always going to be disruption. Sometimes that's happening to us. Sometimes we're enacting that on the world. And so transformational leaders, those are the individuals that are needed. They really are the ones who find a place for their voice in vulnerable ways to bring their perspective in to create change. And that actually is what influences.
People want to influence in the workplace, but they also want to carry that on outside the workplace. So I want to ask you, how have you expanded your influence outside of the organization, and how do you reach more people?
So informally, I think I do something that, a number of years ago, I'd say probably a good decade ago was kind of taboo. And that's really just sharing best practices with anybody who asks. I think it's so important in this space, if we really are seeking to create change in our communities, in the world, that we're not, kind of monopolizing and holding close to the vest the solutions that really do work. Those are the things that need rigor. They need to be done in a consistent fashion. And so I take the time to talk to people, not just about my career journey, but the way in which I've consulted with organizations to bring about lasting and sustainable change. Recently, though, in a more formal capacity, I've been working with the Sorkin Center of DEI Mentorship. And this is an amazing nonprofit organization that's recently started actually providing mentorship and consulting to individuals who sit on boards who need to have a better capability, breadth, and depth of their own DEI experience and knowledge in order to inform the work that the organizations on the boards of which they sit are doing.
Nice. Very busy, very busy. Everybody wants to leave behind some sort of legacy. So what legacy are you working to leave behind? And what do you want to be overall, you would say, known for?
Yeah, I think it's the very thing that brought me to HR many, many years ago when I was starting, out my career. And that is just working to ensure that every associate feels seen and heard and valued and recognized, and that they have an opportunity to do the best work of their life every day and be rewarded for it. I can recall vividly the people who had a hand in the success that I have today, and the people who took the time to mentor and coach and sponsor me. And I hope that people will look back and see that what I was endeavoring every day to do was to really pay it forward.
Now, we talked about quite a lot today. Is there anything else that you can think of that you just wanted to discuss and tell to the audience?
I think the last, kind of parting thought is just to remember that diversity and inclusion, that when we do that right in the moments that matter, it leads to belonging, and it's not a problem. It's actually the solution that needs to be leveraged against the challenges that we're facing inside of our organizations, in the workplace, and broadly in the world.
Okay, well, thank you, Steph, for sharing your perspective with us today, and to Capital One for bringing us this important discussion. And thank you all for watching. We hope you've enjoyed this informative series, Perspectives on Equity, hosted by Capital One.